Hi, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Leadership Tales podcast. Today, delighted to be joined by an amazing lady, Agnes Budzyn. Hopefully pronouncing the name right. Every time I listen to her, she says it so much better than I do. But she's just this incredible lady whose specialism is blockchain. But she's got a background story of being involved with some of the major transformations where countries like Ireland or Greece struggled financially, working with BlackRock at the time. She was involved in the turnarounds and the data in there. And she tells a great story today, which is amazing to hear, around what it's like to work in that space, what it's like to work with blockchain, the ability to simplify the message, the ability not only to look at what historically happened and the data, but using that data or the blockchain to work for the future. And again, for me, it's almost a bit of an education for me today to listen to hear more about blockchain, understand that. And I think there's probably a number of you listening now who have the same level of understanding I do. Some who will be going, Colin, you know nothing, and they're probably right. But this is a chance to listen and understand a bit more about that from an incredible lady. Enjoy. Hey, Agnes, welcome. Welcome to the Leadership Tales podcast. And for those who haven't had the delight of talking to you before, who are you? Tell us your story. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. So, my story. So, originally I'm European. I'm Polish. I spent my career in, one of the largest asset managers in the world, BlackRock. I joined BlackRock as an analyst. It was absolutely fascinating time to do that. I was the child of financial crisis, as you can imagine. So I grew up in a very interesting time. I worked for the team where our job was to really work with a European central bank and other central banks to go and bail out countries like Ireland, Greece, and so on and so forth. I worked with really bailing out also, UBS, cleaning up balance sheets. We worked on helping wind down Lehman Brothers. And really, it was probably the most fascinating learning curve, but it was probably the very, very scary one when you are pretty much early in your career and you look at the financial world, the mighty financial world that is, melting. It is you get probably the best lesson of your lifetime, in a good and bad way.
And tell me what it was like to be in those days, because there's this image, there's this image of organizations, consultants sent in an early age to go sort out. And a lot of people look and go, so how old are you? What brings you to sort out the major problems of Ireland and Greece?
Yep.
So tell us what it was like to be in that moment.
We were very fortunate because when you're a part of a company like BlackRock, you have really access to the smartest and the brightest people. And it was a very, for us, it was also a very humbling moment because I was very young. So being able to sit down with absolutely brilliant people on both ends was really something that you don't get a chance to do every day. But then looking through some of the issues that you were discovering, you kind of looked at it and you're like, how can this be happening? And how can this system be so interconnected when one thing kind of falls? It felt almost like a huge domino effect. And to be honest, I have seen only one side of it. And probably as you start asking different people, you're going to get very, different perspectives and different views. But that's what it was to kind of, for me, sitting where I was sitting, saying the systems are no longer, separated. We are a global village. We are extremely interconnected. And once one little thing falls, a lot of triggers start kind of kicking in and start pulling different things in that you weren't even, you didn't even kind of think about it, that will affect the other 7 things. So I think for me, that was a kind of very interesting lesson and very interesting learning that everything is so interconnected. Everything is so intertwined. All the financial markets are so intertwined that it's very difficult to kind of separate things. So as we look at risk, as we are, designing our strategies, we need to think about it in the much, much more wholesome, more of a, global view than very siloed view.
And you're coming in at the back end of,
Yes.
Obviously, just take the Greek system, and I simplify it because I'm not an expert, but you had, the taxi drivers who didn't particularly like to pay tax, had cash, and then worried about tax and therefore the impact on the national debt and the spending. And then you're coming in and trying to sort what is a legacy issue, but setting it up for the future. And that system change is very difficult to unpick a system and then
Yes.
transfer it into the future. Yeah.
That's absolutely correct, because one thing is to go and almost like, try to clean up and wind down as many things as possible. But then when you do this, you also want to set up things that are really future proof, that are where the countries will be able to not only, grow and be able to maintain their systems, but really be able to take care of their future generations. The system has to be set up in a way that will create jobs. You're able to have a proper retirement, your healthcare, your education. And that all comes down to really a lot of monetary policies and monetary almost habits. And it's very difficult to change that. And it's very difficult to explain to people in 15 minutes that this really, really hard change has to happen, so the next 3, 5 or next generations can really have a prosperous economy. Because at the end of the day, we kind of look at it, and you can see this from France, for example, when France recently has been trying to change their retirement age, and I think they've been trying to change their retirement age only by 2 years or something like that. You have seen this tremendous, backlash. But, going forward, when we look at the next and next and next, generation, that's actually a good thing. But when you are, 2 years from retirement and somebody says, hey, wait, you have to work for another 2 years, you're like, haven't I worked enough?
Yeah.
So it's difficult. But unfortunately, in order to succeed, prosper, grow, a change is necessary. And some countries that we worked with took the change in the way that, yes, we have to do it. Yes, it's extremely painful, but yes, it has to be done, because otherwise our future is not very great looking. And some countries were very upset about it and, blamed a lot of things around them. But you do the best you can with what you have.
For me, there's a piece in here, because we're going to start to talk about blockchain, which is your area. This is your sweet spot. But when we get back to here, blockchain is impacted by politics as well as anything. And the Lehman's you talked about before, talked about Greece, talked about Ireland. Politics has a massive impact on that. So working in that space where you're supposed to be an independent expert, going in and helping, but affected by politics. And Greece was in the middle of multiple elections throughout all of this. How does that play into? I'm fascinated by that.
It was very difficult and very complicated, as you can see. And, unfortunately, there were very, very, fortunately or unfortunately, there were very few people who had really influence on it. For us, we wanted to present all the findings and all the information we gathered in the most independent way, because it was a country that you were looking at. It wasn't just a little fund or another real estate project or something like that. It was a country that was going through turmoil, that was going through political changes, that was going through a lot of different things. So you want to provide as much information as possible and allowed the people who are really in charge of all these decisions to make the best decisions with the information they had at that moment. And that's what we wanted to do, because at that kind of, at that point, there is, only like as much as you can do at the end of the day.
Just coming back to you being in the middle of that, because you're part of BlackRock, but I know the background story that you told me before, and now I get this incredibly confident person in front of me who's worked brain, the size of a planet. I'm going to say that on your behalf, but can think in a different way to a lot of people. Was that natural? Did that develop? How did you get into this, and how did you choose that pathway?
It's really interesting question, and I don't have the exact answer, but I think the way I was shaped, we all are kind of born with different, I guess, threads in our character and DNA. And then as you go through life, your environment and people that you're around and ecosystems you're around they do polish certain threads a little bit more than the others,
I love that. Yeah.
And so you are almost a product, nature versus nurture, but it depends what kind of environment you're in. That's how you get polished and shaped. So I think that's what happens for me. I have, I was in an environment that kind of polished certain things that were maybe a little bit more hidden in me, and then kind of came out more because I was a product of this kind of, environment. But I also had the, almost preset, things to kind of thrive in this kind of environment. So I absolutely loved it. I really learned tremendous amount. I was working with absolutely smart and bright people. And that's what kind of brought some of the things in me that, I was able to learn more, faster, pivot, do a lot of things with a very little time. And I absolutely enjoyed it. My personality was kind of skewed towards that, which helped. Yep. And, and I think kind of giving all these things together, I think that's how I was, at least that's how I was shaped.
And I'm fascinated because, that work is what a lot of people are now talking about, attributes, the attributes, but they are contextual. So in the right context, putting you in a slightly more mundane, less stressful, less complex environment, those attributes might not shine, but finding the right space for your attributes is critical. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
that's exactly how that. I think that's exactly how that works for all of us. So the journey is to kind of find this kind of right spot, the right pod in which your attributes can shine, get the opportunity to shine, because that's another thing. It's really all about the opportunity. We are all talented. We're all, good at a lot of different things, but we don't all have the opportunity to go and polish those attributes.
Yeah. I think also sometimes some of the attributes I put in place in certain areas, people go, really? You're irritating the hell out of me. Just go find another place to put your attributes at the moment. So that there is something about, my squirreling off in different directions, my love of complexity. Yes. And new ideas. It's an interesting one. I want to just touch on leadership for a second, because you talked about in an article I was reading about timing and career. Yeah. And you started in a team. You started to learn from these bright people who obviously were your role models. Interested in terms of now the advisory piece, what you've held on to in terms of your learning as leader and as a leader amongst leaders about how you talk to your advisees now about that. What's your views?
So what I learned is really, that you have to not only come to the, to this, whatever you want to call it, meeting, a place, whatever that might be, with open mind, but you also have to be able to change your mind very quickly, because you constantly get new information. And let's say in this moment we have, X number of information, and then 15 minutes later you get additional information, and you have to be able to pivot, and you have to be able to say, oops, sorry, 15 minutes ago I was wrong, or that wasn't as accurate as it should be. We got a bunch of new information, and now we need to pivot. Now we have to change. Now we have to go a new direction. And I think you have to you have to kind of put your ego aside very often to be able to pivot and do this very quickly. And when you're working in a situation where you're under really a lot of time pressure and stress and things like that, I think it's very important to do that. It's very important to come to these things with as little ego as possible and with as much a mentality of we are here and we're learning literally every moment, and we need to pivot to do the best we can when it matters.
It's fascinating because there's this cultural piece about sometimes knowledge is, well, she's got amazing knowledge. You need to ask her advice. However, that learn and learn fast piece is that knowledge is only as valuable. You know, ChatGPT, AI at the moment is teaching us. Blockchain has taught us that. And, you know, I want to come on to blockchain because the leadership piece and your pivoting, I don't understand blockchain. I sort of do, but I don't. I think there's a lot of people out there who are going, Colin, you're an idiot. Other people are going, no, I'm glad somebody's asked because I don't understand it. Talk to us about blockchain as if I was an idiot. Not difficult for you to do. We're talking to me, but you know, what would you say?
Yeah. So I always tell people to kind of think about blockchain, I guess, in a few different ways. And probably my explanation would be probably skewed a little bit more towards Ethereum, because that's kind of where I come from. Mm-hmm. But imagine blockchain to be almost like the guts of the internet. Imagine blockchain to be like the 22nd century database where you can pretty much go and not only store but validate, process through, keep, and have a transparent way of storing all the information in the world. And I think that's where I know people confuse very often cryptocurrency with blockchain. And I always tell people, like, blockchain, again, we're talking, you know, we're using Zoom and WhatsApp and Gmail. None of us understands what that really runs on. Very few people understand what that really runs on. The only thing we care, it's like, you got my email, our camera is working, and it's all great. So for me, so the way you look at blockchain is really like the superior next step of this internet technology, where information belong to you, where you can be in charge of your own data, where a lot of the environment is very transparent, where the environment is, you know, once you block it in the block, nobody can delete it, nobody can alter it, nobody can change it. It's there, and it's a way of kind of, I would say, bringing a little bit more ownership to what the data that we're producing is, the information that we should own and we should have, instead of all the other third parties having it, you know, monetizing it, benefiting it from it, and sometimes using it for not too good things. So I think people should be kind of thinking about blockchain in that kind of way. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, it does. So it's about it's having your knowledge. Yeah, it is storing it in a place that can actually benefit others, not only yourself. And it's almost a way of, I don't want to say productizing, but it's about capturing to be able to pass it in a better way to other people. Yeah, is that simplified? So yeah, how does that impact businesses? I know that's a simple question, or maybe more it's a complex question, but how does it impact business? Yeah,
it impacts a lot of businesses in a lot of different ways, because when you go and start giving ownership of certain things to individuals, certain businesses will have to go out of business, because certain businesses obviously, made business of using your data to benefit themselves. Now it is becoming more, individual ownership, which is great. It also allows, for example, it also allows things to be executed in much faster way. Imagine you're a big bank, and you have offices around the world. Let's say if you have your CFO who looks at numbers every single day, usually the reports are a few days old, few weeks old, depends. When you use blockchain technology, every single controller, every single person in accounting department, every single CFO can look at the same set of data almost instantly. And then you can take that technology and go broader. Then you can do intercompanies. Then you can do globally. Then let's assume you can provide a key and allow IRS to look through your numbers. Let's say when you do tax return, look through a certain sliver of your numbers, and they can stay there for as long as they want to or for as little as they want to. So it cuts down on sending PDFs, sending emails. It just aligns a lot of itty gritty things that really we don't think about it day in, day out because we're so used to doing it. But that also aligns your bottom line. Has also you can really audit your sets of data almost instantly because it has an auditable track record that is really transparent and open. So it provides businesses just from like an itty-gritty perspective with a lot of tools that the present technology really is not as efficient as it should be. And then when you go through, the global reach where you can go and trace things to source, like right now, when I look at it right now, going forward, we will have, issues. We already have issues with supply chain management, but then we're going to start having issues with, our food contaminations, things like that. Imagine if you can really trace everything to the source. Imagine if you're sending a track of vaccines through 7 countries and you can track this almost instantly and say, well, it was stopped at this place, things overheated, and now half of the vaccines are no good. Then, you understand when it was stopped. You understand when it was stopped. You know the data is clean because nobody can alter it. Nobody can change it. Nobody can fake it. So you understand the purity of the data. You can trace it to origin. And then you can really almost, I don't want to sound like we're assigning blame, but you can actually assign a blame to who should be paying for these, destroyed goods, vaccines, contamination, whatever that might be, because it was stopped for a reason or for no reason. And I think those things, especially when we go to right now AI and go to, all these fake news, fake posts, fake clips, I think blockchain can also play a very direct and very important role, because once you verify that something is original and source of truth on chain, that should be kind of the stamp of approval, and everything else should be really investigated and should be checked and should be considered to not real unless it's proven differently.
So that's a fascinating question, and probably I'm going to peek out at my level of technology intellect. However, there's a question in my mind, because at the moment, AI, the big question is, where's the data being stored, sourced?
Yes.
From all of those things? You've got the hallucinations that data is possibly doing. So people probably listening here are going, okay, so blockchain allows us to go back to that and trust that.
Yep.
But then again, for me, the quality of the data in versus the output of that data is still there. So there's that risk. And in an internal audit way, how you can audit the data, but you've got to trust the data first. Just explain to me how that trust is embedded in that blockchain. Yeah.
So the way I think we should look into it is there are a few different ways. So in order to, for example, if you submit certain data saying, let's say our recording, and so before that recording goes, let's say live, there should be few sources that do verify that what happened here is really us having conversation.
Okay.
So it's not like you just sending this to a block. You sending this to the block, it's a one thing. But then there is a step of almost like the consensus. Like, is that really true? And those consensus are being verified by multiple checks, point checks. And when these point checks are verified, and there's a consensus that our conversation was real, that's when it's going to be lock on the block and say, yes, that's the source of truth. That is correct.
Gotcha. No, that's a really good way of describing it. It goes, I mean, it's one of the things I read my news from conversation. So it's an email that comes out, but it's written by journalists and, it's checked in, it's validated by multiple sources. So that's what you're talking about before it goes out. So I trust what I read in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and I think going forward, the trust will be very, very important for us since we see where some of the world is going.
So what's stopping blockchain? What's causing people either not to adopt it or to have this mistrust? What's your belief?
So I think the misunderstanding. I think the not fully understanding what blockchain, what's cryptocurrency. Because yes, there's a lot of things as we've seen in the news that happen in cryptocurrency that obviously shouldn't happen, and it's going to take time for everything to get cleaned up and adjusted, and it absolutely has to. So I think the misunderstanding in generally, like what's blockchain, technology, and what's cryptocurrency, and people kind of understanding that these are two different things. So I think that's the one quite a bit of big hurdle. You can see already big corporations and companies that are getting very, very good at it and getting a very, very good understanding of it and pivoting in using actually blockchain technology. So that's a good sign, but I think it's going to take a little bit longer because of that. Also, blockchain, it is quite complicated technology, and for every technology, it takes time to be adopted. Like as you know, when first time websites came in on internet, like nobody thought that that's going to be a thing. Nobody thought, anybody's going to be using it because there were so many scams in all these different random websites. And here we are today. So this is going to be very similar. This is going to be a very similar process and progress when people will kind of eventually get to this point. Also, needs to be a lot of infrastructure still built, so the blockchain technology is much easier, cheaper, faster, and more user friendly for average user that grew up in Web 2.0, where there's 1 to 2 click, and if it doesn't work, we are not interested. So there's there's this kind of building technology process, and I as an investor constantly look at different startups, different companies, and I kind of see this already, how much it's being built, how much did blockchain change since the time I joined blockchain in around 2016, 17. It's literally night and day. But unless you're kind of quite deep in it, it's very difficult for you to see. For example, like NFTs, everybody, if you ask average person about NFTs, everybody talks about, $1 million monkeys. But when you really dig deeper into NFTs, you see a lot of, sports events, concerts, and others are using NFTs in forms of tickets. And some of the NFTs are so embedded in the Web 2.0 that you don't even know you're using NFTs because it's so easy and so smooth that people are using it without even knowing it. And that's where the technology is really changing and pivoting and will have a huge impact.
And it must be interesting at the moment with ChatGPT and AI, because I mean, the transformational, there's that podcast and strategy, which is a podcast stroke email I get. And they almost have 2 or 3 episodes a day because it's changing that fast. So you've got one, which is blockchain, which is transformed, but it's probably at a slower pace. Yeah. Then you've got AI and ChatGPT. How is this impacting? How are they impacting each other in your mind?
I think there's going to be a great, beneficial correlation between those two technologies. So I think when you look at the blockchain, I guess every single industry has hypes. So if we had this conversation, 2 years ago, blockchain had its hype moment. Now it's kind of being quiet, which is good because when it's quiet, it means people build, which is wonderful. So you want to be in this space. As an investor, I'm very happy to be in this space because, again, the valuations are much better. The builders and the CEOs and the co-founders and the ideas are really fascinating, and they will really change a lot of things going forward. But going back to AI, exactly, that's the hype moment for AI, where everybody is on stage and talking about what they are doing, which is great. But I think we still have a long way to go. I think the reason we got so excited about AI right now, it is because this is the first time we play with an AI that has a very human-friendly UX UI. And I think there's still a lot of development to be done in that back end of the technology. But I think because ChatGPT brought this to us in such a user-friendly way, we are absolutely mesmerized by it. So I'm very excited by this technology, but I think there's still a way to go. I think another thing that we need to really be very careful with is how we regulated the technology. Because I think I'm not sure if we're learning, but I hope we're learning from what happened with, Facebook and Google and others, how we didn't really regulate well that, part of Web 2.0. And I think once we're coming to these powerful technologies like blockchain and AI, we need to be much, much more diligent about regulation. And that's what, for me, that's what sometimes, keeps me up at night.
Yeah, I can imagine. I was fascinated. I would just want to do a check on the NFTs, just for those who don't know what you mean by NFTs, because I can have a feeling I've got my mother listening to the podcast going, "What's an NFT?"
It's non-fungible token. So It is, I guess, for a lot of people, cryptocurrency, like for example, Bitcoin or Ether, these are fungible. NFTs are non-fungible, so they are pretty much closer to, a picture, but also you can have an NFT. Our recording can be turned into NFT, and also NFTs are very, very good very best things to trace as well. Because you can pretty much record the entire history of where the NFT was, where it's, what happened and things like that. So they're great. They're great. It's a great technology in that kind of space. You can turn videos, podcasts, pictures into NFTs, and you can store them, you can share them, and they have this code embedded that's what makes them very traceable and very unique.
There's a common theme through all of what we've been talking about here, which is the traceability, the trust elements. And then if we go back to your work with the governments and other things, there's this, how do we use it for the future to be better place for decision making? I always used to use the Top Gun analogy. When a fighter pilot's got that drop-down screen, they're able to see and make better decisions. The trust of that data and the future and where that data's come from is critical. So am I explaining that right?
Yes, I think it is critical, and I think it's going to be even more critical going forward, given the fact that we had a discussion about a lot of fake images, fake news. I think being able to source things to its origin and being able to verify what's the source of truth will be very, very critical for us, not only in government and decision-making, policy-making, elections, and anything between it, but also in the financial world. Because imagine if, we've seen this, like if somebody goes and hacks into your Twitter and your publicly traded company and says a whole bunch of crazy things, your stock can really go down almost immediately, and that has a huge financial consequences going forward. And that's also if there is any kind of propaganda or fake news spread about your company, again, that can really affect a lot of people, not only your investors, but different pension funds, governments, endowments, things that can really be catastrophic sometimes.
Yeah, I'm amazed. We had Brexit in our country where it was an intellectual decision that was way beyond the average person in the street. And that includes me. I mean, it's the as somebody once described it, that exam question we got on that day, did we fail it or pass it, depending on your output? But intellectually, to understand that, get that data, have trust in what's behind it is critical in there. I love that.
Exactly. And some of the data that you guys received was inaccurate, was grossly inaccurate.
Yeah.
And a lot of people trusted it that it was accurate. So I think we will see this more and more, unfortunately, and we need to really utilize almost not only blockchain technology, but all the other technologies that we have to make sure that we can really clean up and the data as much as possible and get as close to the source of truth as possible.
I love that. Close to the source of truth. I love.
Yep.
So it's been fascinating to have this conversation. I feel like I'm just getting a private education session for 35 minutes on everything in there. And the way you've described it for me has allowed me to understand a more simplistic way and useful way. So I want to just end on a leadership question. I'm going to bring one of the questions I normally ask at the end of it, but I'm going to ask it with a different flavor. If you were to just highlight 3 things that leaders should be looking for or working with in their space now because of blockchain and the other technologies we're talking about, what would be the 3 principles that you would teach people or tell them to hold true at this point? Yeah.
So I kind of thought about this question because I get, I see some of your notes. And so when I look at the world, I think what I like about blockchain is the fact that it is very not only consensus driven, but it's very community driven. Blockchain is an ecosystem. And I think when we look at the world right now, we see that there is less and less leaders are focusing more and more on very much, individuality. And everything is kind of almost around, worshiping that individual person. So I think using the technologies like blockchain and being able to grow ecosystems and be able to be plugged into these ecosystems, I think that's very healthy, not only for your business, but generally for a community, generally for, the country or the, environment you are in. And I think as leaders, we need to be really a little bit more compassionate. I think it is very important to understand not only the team you're working with, but the environment you're working with and the circumstances you're working with other people, with other organizations, with other, climates, governments, whatever that might be. I think we are not, just one person or one company that is going to, trying to conquer the world. Obviously, we all are trying, but I think being compassionate can really have a huge effect on how your company performs, how your team performs, how you even make deals, and how you are able to negotiate and be much, much better in negotiations when you can understand that certain companies or leaders are going through not only financial crisis, but sometimes government crisis and potentially family and personal crisis. And when we have a little bit more of understanding and compassion, I think that can really produce fantastic outcomes. And I think people and leaders sometimes really underestimate that. A third point is, I think technology is a fascinating thing to have, and we should constantly keep pushing and keep advancing our technology. But we should also we need to focus on doing it in a way that this is, healthy debate. When you kind of, how polishing stones look like, you put them into this little bucket and you keep kind of rolling the bucket. And if the bucket rolls long enough, there is this kind of tension and there's this kind of friction and, almost like bouncing off of each other. But then when you pull these stones, you're like perfectly polished. And that's how I see the technology. Technology is constantly about innovation, healthy debate, respectful debate where we can really bounce idea off of each other, learn from each other, being able to build up each other and being able to really produce something that is really fascinating. Rome wasn't built overnight by, one man. It was, a bunch of different frictions. It was a bunch of pull and push. But I think we need to do it in a way that is, again, we build up each other, we support each other, we help each other, we are able to really learn from each other, because that's what shapes us, as we talked about it. At the end of the day, that's what shapes us, the environment that we're in, the environment that we can do push and pull, we can learn, we can admit mistakes, we can admit that we have to change our mind because we got different sets of information. And that's what really shapes you as a great leader, as a great investor, as simply a great human being, if you are able to go through these motions with really open mind and be able to learn and benefit not only yourself but others.
What was coming to mind here, and it's interesting because we're moving from BlackRock finances, but we're moving into the community side, and it goes back to the work of John Alexander, Citizen. We've moved from the subject state, where we are the subject story, subject to somebody, to what he describes as the consumer story. And I think so much of the world is in this consumer mode, consume more or build more for others to consume. But actually, when it comes down to it, we need to forget the individualistic. We need to look at our role as citizen in this world, and our stones. I love your analogy, stones rubbing together to create the perfect stone. There's some great stories about citizens brought together. And I still think leaders and organizations should be doing that with their technology and their people to get these stones to rub together, fail together, learn fast together. I love that analogy. It's great.
Absolutely. And look, we're all in the business of, making more money, being great investors, improving our world, improving our lives. And that can all be done. And it doesn't have to be in a way that is really destroying our world, having negative effects, because that's when everybody loses, at the end of the day. So we have to focus on the much, much bigger picture where you can, and there is a way to really go and align all these things we talked about, it being good global citizen, being able to have a positive impact on, global society, being able to design fascinating and life improving products and make money. That's all possible. It takes a little bit more harder work and a little bit more, thinking forward, but it's not impossible. We've done this through generations and we can do it over and over again.
I think that's it. And it's this piece about what's the proposition, what's the value proposition, what's the minimal viable product in all of these things, whether it's in our society, our communities, and working them up. I love it. So Absolutely. I'm going to ask the last two questions. One leadership habit that's non-negotiable for you. What's in your life?
It's sleeping.
I love it.
Yeah. I sleep 8 hours, and that's very, very much non-negotiable. I'm working on my second habit, but it's still work in progress. Is waking up in the morning and doing my around 10 to 15,000 steps before I start my meetings. Nice. That's my other kind of habit that I'm trying to make it non-negotiable, because I'm not a big fan of running, but I'm a big fan of walking, and walking really helps me clear my brain. Walking gives me a lot of different epiphanies. So I have noticed that anywhere through the day, if it's in the morning, afternoon, or before I go to bed, if I go and walk for, like I said, 45 minutes or so, it really helps me to kind of rethink a lot of different things. It helps me to kind of repivot different things. So I've been doing this for the past maybe 12 months, very, very consistently. For the past many, many years, quite often, I was always a big fan of walking. I never understood why. And I think now kind of that epiphany just hit me, saying that's why, because it helps me clear my brain.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you on that. I was listening to Dr. Andrew Huberman, does the Huberman podcast, and it's all about movement. But he talks about just, zone 2 workout, being still be able to talk. And that for me is walking, power walking or speed walking is that. But then having the ability to just notice what's around you. I love that.
Exactly.
Final question then, flipping back up. So I'm fascinated in this because although we've talked about what you've done, get a bit of an insight into you as an individual, and it's the one instant that's shaped you as a leader and you as an individual as a leader. What would it be?
When I was in Ireland. I was walking very late at night from my work, and when I walked on the streets of Ireland, I seen people that were just a few years older than me sitting on the streets and asking for money. And for me, when I looked at it, it was a very pivotal. This was first time when I seen country being in, like a first hand in crisis. And it was a, European country that a few years ago was a, mega power that was very prosperous, that was doing extremely well. And when you looked at it, that I'm a numbers person. So I always look at the numbers, and I always believe that numbers tell me story. And I've been looking at a lot of numbers during my period of time, as you can imagine. But when you actually look at the surroundings, and when you actually look at people and see how difficult that period is for individuals, for really people, that kind of changes you as a person. It kind of puts what's happening, it puts it in a really in perspective. And I think for me, when I looked at it, and it gave me a very good understanding how quickly it can go from one end to the other, how quickly ties turn, how quickly some decisions that were being made can impact you almost immediately, and how bad it can get. So for me as a leader, it gave me kind of understanding that things just happen really quickly, and you constantly have to move very quickly, make decisions very carefully, but also quickly. And then be able to be compassionate, because at the end of the day, it's all about the people. And it was very sad moment, but I think it was a moment that really made me think about what was happening in Europe and in financial world, not only as a financial crisis, but financial crisis that really affected a lot of individuals who really didn't do anything wrong. No. Or they didn't make any wrong decisions. You could make all the right decisions and still end up in not a very good place.
It's very profound. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I think it's those moments in your life where you realize. Remember coming out with a colleague out of a client, and that one of the women we'd been working with, she came out and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, waiting to get a taxi, hasn't appeared." And she said, "Oh, I can give you a lift." And we got down to a car. This was in Bangalore. Got down to a car. And she started to move her stuff out of the back of the car. And I was like, "Have you been sleeping in this car?" She says, "Yeah, I sleep here every night." So she lives so far from Bangalore that she was turning up. She had her shoes, a car. She looked immaculate. But her life was sleeping in that car and then going washing inside. And so therefore this outside perception of people's lives versus what's really going on, the impact we have on them is just massive. It really made me think, never take for granted what is on the outside in terms of someone's life. Yeah, so.
Absolutely. But, you learn those lessons only if you pay attention.
Yeah.
And I am very extroverted, and I love people, and I spend a lot of time with people. But the reason I really like this, the reason why I make this such a big part of my life, because every single time I'm around people, I learn such a tremendous amount of things. Yeah. But you have to pay a lot of attention. And I think that's where there's a tremendous amount of, knowledge and valuable knowledge, but only if you want to pay attention to it.
Yeah, I love that. What a good note to end on. Agnes, if people want to find you, hear more about you, learn more about you, where would they go to?
So I am on LinkedIn and I am on Threads and on Twitter. So, it's at Agnes Budzyn, and you can reach out, and I'm always happy to tell you more about what I'm doing, tell you a little bit more about blockchain if you're interested in. So all these places, always happy to do that. I can also share my email with you. So if you want to drop that, that's great as well.
Great to do, Agnes. It's been a joy. Second time we've had the chance to chat, and it's just, it's amazing. Love your energy, and thank you for indulging me in my trip through blockchain. It's great to hear. Yeah.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thank you so much for having me. And I am looking forward to keeping in touch and speaking more.
Looking forward to myself. Good. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
What an episode. Agnes, just a brilliant conversation. For me, 2 or 3 critical points. I want to come to the end, really, which was the story about the young people on the streets in Ireland and how the impact of small decisions that are seemingly small, that impact people to be on the streets, no fault of their own in what they've done, and how we can start to move back into how we create organizations, communities, where people's decisions are based on data that is solid, that can be trusted, that we can use the systems like blockchain to do that. I think that's one thing that resonates for me. The second thing that resonates for me is just how there's different peaks and troughs, and ChatGPT and AI is now on its peak. And therefore her story about how a blockchain was there, and now in the background it's being built and it's being developed, and how it's transformed. And it's this, sometimes the peaks are the bit that grab the attention, and the user interface of ChatGPT has helped that, as she talked about there. But then there's this solid building of our technology, but putting the human construct into there. And there's that moment when we talked about citizen and how, being better connected with others, not individualistic, how we can be compassionate in terms of how we do the technology, but how we use it to collaborate together for a better society and a better future. I think those are the key points that I picked out of this conversation today. Great conversation. Love Agnes. And look forward to welcoming you back on another episode of the Leadership Tables podcast very shortly.